Can you explain who AntiFa is, what they stand for, and why Paul Ryan is defending them?
Well, Ryan's not defending them, but he is attacking people for vilifying them and stuff. I guess it's defending them. Might be the same thing. In the 1920s, the communists in the United States said that we are the only genuine people standing up to Hitler and Mussolini, that all of the democracies are weak-kneed, the British are not, America's isolationist and ignoring the danger, and we alone are standing up to fight fascism. And this manifests itself in the 1930s when fascists led by Francisco Franco, toppled the democratically elected regime in Madrid, in Spain, and therefore began the Spanish Civil War of the fascists rebelling against the democracy. And Hitler and Mussolini rushed support to Franco and actually sent in troops and bombers. There's a famous painting by Picasso, The Bombing of Guernica, which was the first civilian bombing in history, where enemy air forces literally targeted civilians in that day, in Market Day. And it's all about people screaming as they're being bombed. And Russia was the only source of support for the anti-fascists, for the pro-democracy forces. They were pouring out aid to them, whereas the Nazis and the fascists were giving aid to Franco. And the United States said, we're neutral, we're not going to help either side, and passed a Neutrality Act, making it a crime to help either side being a euphemism for helping the democracy. So Franco got aid from the Nazis, but the good guys didn't get any aid. They, by the way, formed something called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which was a bunch of American men who went over to Spain and fought side by side with the government, the democracy, against the fascists. They were immortalized in For Whom the Bell Tolls and To Die in Madrid and several other Hemingway novels, because he was embedded with the government forces. Anyway, at that point, one of the organizations that the communists formed to rally people against fascists was AntiFa, A-N-T-I-F-A, the anti-fascists. And it became one of the strong pillars in opposing Hitler and the Nazis. Then, in January, I think, of 1939, early in 39, Russia and Hitler signed a pact together. They became allies. Stalin completely flip-flopped from saying Hitler was his worst enemy to saying Hitler was his best friend. And all of a sudden the aid to Spain stopped, and the Russians sided with Hitler and Mussolini. And at that point, most of these groups folded up, went out of business, because the Russians ran out on them. But the really slavish ones, the really ones that were puppets of Moscow, like AntiFa, stayed with Stalin and defended him and said, well, he's just buying time. He knows that Hitler will come after him, and he needs time to build up his armed forces. The reason he needed time was in his last purge, he had killed a third of the Russian generals, and he had no army left, really, which was why the Germans succeeded so brilliantly when they attacked him. And so AntiFa became known as the core communist organization, masquerading as anti-fascists. And it remained relatively small, not consequential, until recently it got built up significantly by the new left in an anti-government offensive. And it allied with the left and characterized itself as the only legitimate anti-fascist organization. So it's an old tactic, it's an old organization, but given new life by the left in the United States.